So in this video today, we're going to be talking about my opinion on whether or not Boeing stock is a buy right now based on the current market conditions and based on what is going on with the airline industry as well as within the Boeing company. Now, a lot of people know that Boeing is a large component of my own investment portfolio. So obviously, in a nutshell, I personally see this stock as a buy, but I'm going to share with you guys what is going on with this company, what's been happening with the stock, and then I'm going to share with you guys my bullish perspective here, as well as my bearish perspective on why you may decide to invest in this company yourself, or why you may not want to invest in this company right now. So here's the current situation with Boeing stock. Well, pretty much anyone who bought this stock from 2017 on has gotten burned severely right now based on the share performance. And from 2017 to 2019, this stock was like the darling of the Dow. It was a company that no matter what just kept going up, and I have been tracking this company since 2017 myself, waiting for a buying opportunity. And I know I talked about this stock multiple times over the last couple of years on this channel, and I've always said it would be a great company to buy on sale, but up until this point, it was one of those stocks that just never budged. Even when we saw the fatal crashes with the 737 MAX aircrafts, and even when those aircrafts were grounded, we still didn't see the stock budge. And I've been waiting and waiting for the stock to go on sale, guys, and finally, based on this pandemic and everything going on, the stock finally became unhinged in a major way, and we have seen a massive sell-off taking place here with Boeing stock. So over the last couple of years, it seems like no matter what happened with Boeing, it continued to trade in this range of around $350 per share. Then finally, based on the pandemic and the massive effect this had on the airline industry, we finally saw the stock become unhinged, and it fell to a 52-week low of $89 per share. So just to show you guys how severe of a sell-off that is, from the 52-week high to the 52-week low, which is the highest point the stock has traded in the last year, to the lowest point, that is a sell-off of 77%, which is something that you do not ordinarily see, especially with a company that is on the Dow. So it's very rare to see this type of event happen with a stock like Boeing, but I will say this, guys, based on what is going on with this company, it is for good reason. So now the stock has climbed back up from their 52-week low of $89 per share up to around $130, and it seems to have stabilized somewhere around that position for right now. So is this currently a buying opportunity for Boeing? Well, that's what we're going to discuss, and just so we're clear, guys, to make this disclaimer here, I am not a financial advisor. This is not any kind of financial advice, and you should always do your own due diligence before buying or selling any stocks. I am merely just sharing my opinion on Boeing as a stock that I currently own. So Boeing is currently one of the largest stocks that I'm allocating money towards in my portfolio. Even though they suspended their dividend, I still see this personally as a stock that I want to be owning and accumulating shares of. So before I get into my reasons of why I'm buying Boeing, I briefly want to cover what exactly this company is for those who are not familiar, because it's a very unique company. Boeing essentially operates through three different segments. The first one most of us are familiar with, and this is where they are in a disaster situation, and that is the commercial airplane segment. And in fiscal year 2019, that accounted for 42% of their total revenue. And in this segment, they are essentially selling commercial jets and airplanes in a duopoly with another company called Airbus, and we'll address that later on in this video. Their second segment here is defense, space, and security, which was 34% of total year revenue in fiscal year 2019, and that is essentially military aircrafts and weapons via government contracts. And then lastly, we have global services, which was 24% of revenue, which is supply chain services, engineering services, etc. And so all of these other segments here for Boeing outside of commercial airplanes are doing just fine. But unfortunately, the commercial airplane segment was their largest in terms of revenue in fiscal year 2019. So now what I want to cover here, guys, is what exactly happened with Boeing stock. We know the stock became unhinged in a massive way, but it's one of these situations here where the trouble started for them a couple of years ago. It wasn't just out of nowhere where the stock took a 77% dive. Here is what happened with Boeing stock. Well, back in 2017, Boeing's new commercial airplane, the 737 MAX, entered service, and then there were two fatal crashes that happened about 5 months apart. One was in late 2018, and one was in early 2019. Now, at first, they believed that that first crash was a fluke, but when that second crash had very similar characteristics to the first one, major regulatory agencies began banning this aircraft and mandatory grounding of the 737 MAX. The 737 MAX was officially grounded from flights worldwide by March 13th of 2019. So effectively here, there were 387 Boeing 737 MAX aircrafts in service across 59 airlines, and now, based on those two crashes and safety concerns, none of those airplanes were allowed to fly. So those airlines were in this situation here where they had taken deliveries of planes that they could not fly, and they were making payments on them because there's a lot of debt involved in the airline industry because these airplanes are around $100 million a piece. So it's not something where you just buy it up front. You typically will pay for it over the useful life of the aircraft. So these airlines were making payments on these airplanes that they couldn't even fly, that were sitting there on the tarmacs unable to be in service. Now, this has become the longest grounding of a U.S. airliner in history. Here we are over a year later, and these airplanes are still grounded, and it has estimated to cost Boeing $18.6 billion by March of 2020. So this has been a massive fallout here for Boeing, and it also has hurt the airline industry as well because many airlines took delivery of these planes that they were not able to have in service, and this ultimately led to Boeing having to pay damages to some of these major airlines based on being unable to fly these planes. But to make a bad situation worse here, there are 387 MAX aircrafts that are out of service, but Boeing continued to produce them from the time that they were grounded up until earlier this year. And in that timeline here, guys, another 400 newly manufactured 737 MAX aircrafts await delivery to airlines pending the aircraft's return to service. So essentially you have 387 planes that are grounded, 400 awaiting delivery, and these delivery contracts being canceled left and right by these airlines. Now, Boeing did slow down their production of this aircraft after the grounding to around 42 planes per month, and then finally in January of this year, they completely halted production until they got approval to fly this aircraft again because they had 400 of these planes that were not delivered. That was a massive cash investment, and it was no longer feasible to continue producing these planes. So not only is Boeing sitting on a boatload of inventory right now, they also had to pay damages to the major airlines that purchased these airplanes that they could not fly. They also had to pay damages to victims of the crisis as well. So this was a massive financial burden on this company based on these crashes and the grounding of this aircraft. So it's important to understand, guys, that going into this global pandemic that nobody saw coming, airlines were already frustrated with Boeing and they were already cutting orders. In fact, they lost 183 737 MAX orders in 2019 alone. And then, of course, the worst possible situation happened here for Boeing, which was this global pandemic, which led to this mass cancellation of orders. So in January, it wasn't too bad. They had 0 new orders, but 0 cancellations. And then in February, the cancellations started rolling in. 59 737 MAX orders were canceled. Then in March, 150 737 MAX orders were canceled. So they had these orders that were filled people had paid deposits on them, and then they were canceling these orders. And now they are involved in a lawsuit here with a major airline who had paid them an advance on 40 airplane orders that were canceled. So now they are in a litigation situation with many airlines, having to pay back these advances on this massive oversupply of 737 MAX aircrafts that still can't even be returned to service. Now, it's important to understand here, guys, that ordinarily speaking, Boeing operates on a backlog where airlines will order a new airplane from them, oftentimes even years ahead. They pay in advance, and then as soon as that airplane is complete, the airline will take delivery. So they operate on a backlog, they receive in advance, and they pretty much have every single airplane they're producing accounted for because they have a customer waiting for it on the other end. Now the exact opposite has happened. They have a product that can't be used in service right now. Meanwhile, the demand for that product is plummeting, and it's a very costly item. So that is essentially the story here, guys, of how Boeing went from being this darling of the Dow, this stock that would not budge below $350 per share, to falling 77% from the 52-week high to the low. And that is why we are seeing Boeing in the current situation where they have suspended their dividend, and they were earlier this year considering seeking out a bailout from the federal government. So your question probably is, why would anybody in their right mind be looking to buy a stock like this right now? And that's what I'm going to share with you now. So first of all, guys, the main reason why I am purchasing Boeing stock right now is because of the defense spending. It's essentially the separate business that Boeing has that they can fall back on. So as mentioned earlier, guys, the defense, space, and security segment made up 34% of their revenue for fiscal year 2019. So it's not their biggest segment, but it is a large amount of money, and they also derive a lot of government spending through the global services segment. So a lot of the revenue for Boeing comes directly from the US government in the form of defense spending. So just how much money does the federal government spend with Boeing each year? Well, for starters, the US government is the single largest customer out there for Boeing. In 2018, the US government spending with Boeing accounted for 31% of their total revenue. And it's important to understand here, guys, this is very consistent spending that they have here with Boeing. It's not based on recessions or the overall economy. The only main factor that comes into play here is whether or not we have a Republican or Democratic House, which I'll address that here in a second. So between the global services segment and the defense and security segment, that accounts for 31% of their total revenue, and that comes directly from the US government, and that would very likely not be interrupted based on the current situation, because we are continuing to spend money on our military year after year, and the only thing that could have a real effect on this is if the House swung towards Democratic. Right now we have a Republican president and a Republican House, and it is well known that Republicans tend to prioritize military and defense spending. So obviously, guys, this is an election year, and in 2020, we have Trump up for re-election. Most presidents end up being two-term presidents, so it is likely that Trump is going to be re-elected based on that, and as a result, we are probably going to see elevated defense spending with this Republican House through 2024. So that is the main reason why I am buying Boeing, is because despite the situation with their commercial airplanes, they have this other business to fall back on that is recession-proof, that is not tied to the overall economy, that just receives consistent revenue through government contracts. Now, my second reason for buying Boeing stock is based on this duopoly situation they are in. Now, we have all heard of a monopoly before, and that is when one company has control of a particular industry where they virtually have no competition. And based on these unique characteristics of the commercial airplane industry, what we have here is a duopoly, and that means there are just two companies out there that are producing commercial airplanes, and that is Boeing and Airbus. So there's very little competition here in this industry, and there isn't likely to be any going forward based on the moat or the barriers to entry. It costs an astronomical amount of money to build a $100 million airplane. They are supplied parts from tens of thousands of different companies. And there are so many reasons why this is a situation where we just have two main competitors here because of these high barriers to entry, as well as their intellectual property and the number of patents a company like Boeing has. Now, for the last 10 years or so, Boeing has had a slight edge on Airbus in terms of number of aircrafts delivered. However, in 2019, based on the grounding of the 737 MAX, that was actually a really good situation for Airbus, and their deliveries far exceeded that of Boeing. But in the past, these companies tend to be neck and neck in terms of deliveries, and over the last 10 years, Boeing has had a slight edge. But that is essentially the only competitor here for Boeing in terms of the commercial airplanes. There are other defense contractors out there like Lockheed Martin, and there's a couple of other ones out there that do serve the US government, but in terms of the commercial airplanes, they are in a duopoly type situation. The third reason here why I am buying Boeing stock is because I see this as a bailout friendly industry. Now, there were talks earlier this year of Boeing potentially seeking out a $60 billion bailout, but the Treasury Secretary has said that this is not the case right now. Boeing is not currently seeking a bailout from the federal government. However, it is expected that they will need to take government aid at some point here in the future, and there may be some strings attached related to share buybacks or things of that nature. One of the reasons why Boeing is kind of in a situation where they don't have enough cash to stay afloat, they're not in a horrible situation by any means, but they have invested a lot of money in share buybacks and dividends, which allowed that share price to stay afloat. And keep in mind, upper management of a company tends to have some type of share-based compensation, so it's in their own best interest to have that share price at an elevated state. So by completing these share buybacks and prioritizing that over building up a cash cushion, they ended up in a bit of a crunch here with this current situation. So one of the things they're talking about is if a company is bailed out by the federal government, they may be unable to have share buybacks for a period of time or until they pay back that bailout. But regardless of that, guys, I like investing in these bailout-friendly industries. That's exactly why I bought into the airline stocks earlier this year when the fall began, because I knew that there's pretty much no chance in hell that the US government would let the airlines go under, because that would deal such a massive blow to the overall economy. And sure enough, the airlines did receive a bailout. So why is Boeing a bailout-friendly industry? Well, it has to do with two things here. Number one, based on the number of companies that serve parts to Boeing, and then number two, based on the defense spending. For starters, guys, the US government couldn't exactly allow their second largest defense contractor to just go out of business because of the amount of spending. 31% of their revenue for 2018 came from the federal government. They can't exactly just let them go out of business. Second of all, so many different companies supply parts to Boeing that if Boeing went under, the fallout would be massive. Boeing works with more than 12,000 different businesses, which collectively have over 1 million supplier-related jobs, and these are all companies that supply parts directly to Boeing that are involved somewhat in their production of airplanes or other defense-related products. So if Boeing went under, millions of jobs would be lost as a result, not just the jobs at Boeing. Now, in terms of their cash situation right now, they do have some cash on the sidelines here. As of the most recent quarter, they have a cash cushion of around $10 billion. So they do have some amount of money where they don't need a bailout right now. But based on how long this airline crisis lasts and how long the 737 MAX remains grounded, they may eventually need to seek a bailout, which, like we said, is probably going to have some kind of strings attached. So guys, those are my reasons for buying Boeing stock. Now I want to cover 3 reasons why this may not be a company that you yourself want to purchase. Number 1, the biggest one here for me, guys, is the fact that we have a very long road ahead. It's important to understand, guys, this is not what I would call a 3 to 6 month recovery for the airlines. This is a massive blow that is going to take years to recover from, maybe even 3 to 5 years until airlines are back in a situation where they were before this global pandemic. So if you're comfortable sitting on a stock like this for 3 to 5 years or more, based on the current share price and based on where this company used to trade, it's probably a buying opportunity. But if you're looking to buy a stock and sell it 6 months down the road or a year down the road, this is probably not going to be that opportunity for you, because I feel this is a very long road ahead. Another thing to mention here, guys, is that the larger a company is, the longer it takes for them to turn around. A perfect example of this here, guys, is GE or General Electric. They have been involved in a financial crisis here, and the stock began tumbling back in 2017. And if you look at that stock, it has been a very slow and low process where the stock has just been trading at a very low price for many years now. And while I do own that stock and I expect it to perform well in the future, they aren't going to be turning around overnight. So I would expect a similar situation to occur here with Boeing. So in order for Boeing to turn around here financially, first of all, the 737 MAX needs approval to fly again. And then after that, airlines are going to have to be in a situation where they can stop canceling orders from Boeing, and then after that, begin taking new orders of airplanes to put into service. Then after that, their surplus of 400 737 MAXs that they have already produced have to be depleted based on these order cancellations. And then after that, Boeing will likely be able to return to a situation where they're operating on a healthy backlog, and then once their financial situation improves, then they will likely be able to reinstate that dividend. But guys, again, this is not a 3 to 6 month process. It is probably more like half a decade for all of this to take place here. Another reason why you may not want to buy this stock is because they have suspended their dividend. So right now, guys, your only chance of getting paid with Boeing is asset appreciation, or buying the stock low and selling it for a higher price down the road. The reason why I like investing in dividend stocks, and in particular dividend aristocrats, is even if that share price doesn't budge for a set period of time, or even if it declines slightly, I am still earning dividends on a quarterly basis that allow me to reinvest those dividends, giving me a larger position over time. So when that stock does have a positive move, I have more shares to capture that move. When you're investing in a stock like Boeing, your only shot at getting paid here is through asset appreciation. And based on the fact that we have a very long road ahead, it could be, a 1 to 2 year period where the stock massively underperforms the market based on having to initiate these turnaround plans. So I don't think that we're going to see Boeing reinstating that dividend anytime soon, and oftentimes it is a frustrating experience holding a stock where you only have one way to get paid, which is asset appreciation, especially when that stock underperforms the market for a very long period of time. But if you have that long-term mindset, you don't mind holding on to the stock for maybe 5 years or so, or maybe even beyond that, it could be a stock that you yourself consider. And lastly, guys, the other reason why you may not want to buy this stock is because there is a massive amount of lost trust with Boeing as a result of the 737 MAX crashes and the investigations that followed. And the way I want to describe this here, guys, is this. If Boeing was offering a free trip anywhere you wanted to go in the world, but the only stipulation is you had to fly on a 737 MAX, would you say yes or no to that offer? My bet is that the majority of people would be afraid to get on that airplane based on the 2 fatal crashes that occurred. And that is the problem here, is that the public perception of this company is very poor, and people no longer trust this company. And it's going to take a very long time for that trust to be rebuilt, especially because people lost lives as a result of some missteps with this company. And this whole investigation surrounding the 737 MAX crashes revealed some massive culture problems within Boeing and eventually led to the ousting of the former CEO, where essentially he was kicked out based on some bad policies. And as the old saying goes, guys, the shit flows downhill. So this bad culture came from the top and made its way down. So you have very bad public perception. People don't trust this company right now. And a mixture here of bad culture that has to be restructured. So again, this just ties into that idea of this being a very long road ahead. So in a nutshell, guys, Boeing has this defense business to fall back on that is a decent amount of their total revenue. It is very consistent spending, and if we have a two-term president here, we should see consistent military and defense spending through 2024, which should be enough to allow this company to stay afloat. And if they end up in financial hardships, they are very likely to receive a bailout based on that defense spending and the number of different businesses that serve parts to Boeing. That being said, as a result of the suspended dividend, you just have one way to get paid here, which is asset appreciation, and I don't expect to see this stock having a turnaround anytime soon. You also have the culture problems here within this company and negative public perception, so there's definitely a very bullish perspective here on Boeing and a good case for a bearish one as well. And ultimately, it's up to you to decide if this is a company that you choose to invest in. I personally like this stock for a long-term investment, and 5 years from now, I expect this to be one of the top performers in my portfolio based on the price I am accumulating shares of right now. But I would say there's a good chance of this stock underperforming the market for the next 1 to 2 years because of how long this is all going to take. But anyways, guys, that being said, that is my opinion on Boeing stock. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. And if you made it to the very end of the video, make sure you drop a like for the YouTube algorithm. I would very much appreciate that. Lastly, guys, if you want to grab 2 free stocks, Webull is running a promotion right now where if you open up a brokerage account with them, you'll get 1 free stock just for signing up. And then if you fund the account with $100 or more on your initial deposit, you will get a second free stock. So if you want to grab 2 free stocks, guys, that's the top link down in the description below. And I am affiliated with Webull, so I may earn a commission in the process. But thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe and hit that bell if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video.